Hey, Anthony, I got a question for you.
What's up?
What is or who is your favorite Spider-Man villain?
Spider-Man villain specifically.
Yeah, like I'm gonna say any of them for now.
We talked about this recently while we were actually recording the Spider-Man gameplay, and I would say I kind of still agree with the Green Goblin or Venom. Those two, I know they feel like very cliche, very common, but they just have so much history with Spider-Man that I do love almost all of it.
Definitely, like you have Green Goblin who took away his actual like love of his life. Sorry, I know everyone's like MJ and him are meant to
Spoilers.
be.
Sorry, we went too
For
total thread.
comic book issues that came out in 1963. Okay. And then Venom definitely was a cool concept that kind of I don't know. I feel that his development was very interesting. That we should talk about at something like that at some
Mhm.
point.
I can't wait till we get to it in this storyline. The Venom story in this one is amazing. I'm just saying that now. I know it's super early, but there's a old PS2 game that I have that I almost want to play again for this because it tells that story so.
Well, speaking of Venom in this storyline, this is going to be. Wait, we have the fucking
Yeah, we have to,
paper.
we have to interact.
Why would a misguided penmanship?
Yes, I'm Anthony.
And I'm Chris, and this is Ultimate Spider-Man in review.
Yes.
So, we are currently starting just at the beginning of Ultimate Spider-Man,
Mhm.
and we're gonna see how it feels from here. How about you take away and do the background information?
Absolutely. Yeah, Ultimate Spider-Man released in the year 2000. It was written by Michael Bendis, and the art was done by three different people throughout its run: Mark Bagley, Stuart Immonen, David Lafayette. Sorry if I'm saying any of these names wrong. During its entire run, Ultimate Spider-Man was kind of held as top tier. Um, the actual Sam Raimi movies and most movies now also took a lot of inspiration from the series. Uh, like the organic webbing and stuff like that was kind of very criticized, and there's actually a part in this where they make fun of it because Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man are actually in this comic series.
Really?
Yes, 100%.
I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, we haven't gotten there. We'll get there eventually, but it is a fun little
And
detail.
I actually have been rewatching the Tobey Maguire movies. I just got done with the second one,
Hmm.
and I'm like, I the similarities are priceless.
Oh yeah.
Um, the Sam Raimi's movies, like there's the scene with Doc Ock in the second one where he has the cloth over his eyes
Yep.
and he's laying on the bed. That scene lasted a
Hmm.
ridiculous long amount of
But
time.
obviously, Ultimate Spider-Man is just a retelling of the original story, pretty much. At this point in time, like you mentioned, Spider-Man released back in 1963, and this is 37 years later that they decided, hey, we're going to try and revitalize it in a completely new, modern version. And so, this is honestly one of my favorites. This is kind of what I grew up reading, and it's where you get kind of the edgy Peter Parker, but it's a lot of fun. And I know when the artist first signed on to work with the writer at the time was super worried because originally the Spider-Man origin was 7 pages long, but the writer was able to make it into 7 full issues or 180 pages, which means he drug it out a lot.
Which is like nice for like you look at the Sam Raimi movies and when you condense things down it doesn't necessarily flow too good. Like
Hmm.
I mean to be fair, Toby's development in Spider-Man isn't bad, but also comparing that to being able to sit down, read, get to actually know these characters because just like in the original Uncle Ben storyline, we only get to see him like once or twice and then he dies.
Yeah.
But this one, we'll get into it more. There's a lot more thorough of an explanation and this Ultimate Spider-Man really kind of just was just there to help revitalize and repurpose. It did its job and it did it well.
Hmm. So obviously, like I said, we're gonna kind of try and go through arcs, and the actual first arc of the story is kind of titled "Power and Responsibility." It's issues 1 through 7.
Of course.
And then actually each issue has its own subtitle. Issue 1 being "Powerless." And so, do you want to go and take this from it?
All right, sure. Get the same basic origin with Peter Parker going around in high school, and we get to see a couple of the way that people act in this. Like in the beginning, we get to see Norman Osborn. It actually opens up with being in Norman Osborn's lab, see him working on some things, get to see the pretty cool spider, and then it goes to Peter Parker, who still looks like his nerdy self and kind of just acts pretty much the same. You get a look at MJ, and she's I'm pretty sure she acts well. She's a little bit more like a rebellious.
Yeah, like she's kind of nerdy, kind of rebellious. She's kind of like she fits in with everyone.
Hmm. Which I think they tried to do in the original comics, but she was a little bit more of a party animal with that
Hmm.
one. Which does she say the funny line of like you hit the jackpot?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm like 99% sure, and that's actually a line.
All right, and then there's Kenny, which is that Flash's best friend?
Yeah, he's the big burly one.
Yeah, along with Uncle Ben gets introduced in this one, and he is a little bit different.
Yes, they're definitely more modern, a little more hip, and he has a ponytail and everything. He's a lot more of that the cool dad, more or less. Like, would be the best way to
I
describe it.
just want to point out that Anthony put in the same exact ponytail before we started this. Like I'm just like you laugh, but like you're wearing it right now.
The other characters that kind of like pop up here in these like first issue as well. It's like Harry Osborn, um,
Yeah.
Aunt May, obviously, some of the teachers.
Okay, but with that out of the way, we get back to the beginning of everything. Everyone knows the storyline. He goes to the trip into Osborne Industries. Peter gets bit by a radioactive spider. Uh, I don't remember it. Was it super bad for the original bite where he passed out and like started like convulsing violently?
No, I don't think it was that bad. I think he pretty much just walked away the first
See,
time.
this one really sets the mood. Like the Ultimate series are known to be dark and edgy, like everyone was talking about, but this one was like straight out the get go. This is the ultimate where it's just
Hmm.
gonna Peter is like violently spazzing out on the floor, having an episode, and takes they take him straight to the hospital, and then Norman pays for the hospital bills,
Hmm.
which I is a little bit different because, like we said, this didn't happen before, and we already get to see a more darker side to Norman. This Norman Osborn is okay with like human experimentation because he knows what happened to Peter. Peter got bit by the spider. He knows, and he's just watching Peter as his new lab rat.
Yep, he's like, is he gonna die? What's gonna happen? Um, and so it is a very, like I said, you perfectly nailed on the head there. It's interesting kind of seeing how early it kind of gets dark and kind of weird.
And along with this, we also get to see Uncle Ben's personality a little bit more
Hmm.
because Ben is already being a lot more considerate because Oscorp is entirely in the wrong with this
Yep.
whole situation. The spider broke free on a school field trip. They should have the right to sue, but Ben chooses not to for the sake of Harry Osborn and Peter Parker's friendship.
Hmm. Which is a very cute kind of note. Like, and I know, like in this, even I even put like quotation marks around the friendship thing because, like, when we actually meet Harry and Peter in this, like Harry's like, "Hey, I'll come over and we'll do homework, right?" You know, and like Peter's like, "I can just do it for you." He's like, you don't need to come hang out with me and pretend you like me." And then Harry's just kind of like a whole bunch of that kind of backhanded compliments, pretty much.
It's very interesting concept from going from there to that because like I mean, to be fair, if I was just a stereotypical like jock like that, I'd be like, all right, here's your homework, take it. But obviously, there's some sort of like kind of interest there.
No, exactly. So it is very interesting the dynamic between them so far. Um, and so we kind of get back. Peter's back in school, and immediately the bullies are back at it. They're like, "Oh, we're gonna kick him. We're just gonna kick him."
Oh yeah, because they're
And
trying to kick him in his locker, right?
yep, they're trying to kick him into the locker, and like Peter ends up like catching it, and then uses obviously his Spidey sense and flips him over
That's
and
Spidey's strength.
strength, and
Yeah.
like he ends up passing out again, goes back to the hospital, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna do some blood tests," and ends up Norman's like, "Hey, we need that blood so we can test it." So he sends in a guy. The blood is stolen, taken back, and when they test the blood, they actually find out that the Oz formula that's in the spider is killing Peter. At this point, Norman tells the man who had stolen the blood to take care of Peter.
So, and by take care of Peter, we mean the best way of like hitting him with a fucking car.
Yeah.
Like there is no subtlety to this at all. Peter is walking home from school, I'm pretty sure, and this just car goes straight into him.
Hmm.
But of course, I don't like that you put the words Peter Tingle in the notes, but his Spidey sense comes in the way. He does like the stereotypical jump out of the way, and even tries to shoot him. Like shoots him in broad daylight.
Yep.
Like this is in the middle of the streets, and Peter just barely manages to navigate away. And when this happens, Norman is like, "Hold up, this kid's got like some sort of superpowers now. Like, don't
Hmm.
kill this kid. Actually, let's watch him even more."
Exactly. and Peter ends up going home, and he's like trying to study what's going on. And one of the big notes and very big differences actually in this storyline is that this Peter Parker is filled with a lot of teenage angst. Aunt May and Uncle Ben aren't happy that Peter didn't go back to school and stuff like that, and so it's like very angsty. And like I know there's quite a few times in these notes where all I put is just teenage angst because it's a very interesting interpretation. Like I enjoy it because it's realistic.
See, one thing that I always looked at in the older Spider-Man comics was the fact that like Peter did have his flaws there. Peter's flaws in there necessarily weren't too prominent. It was normally him getting like frustrated at something dumb. This Peter gets aggressive at
Mm-hmm.
anything that doesn't go his way. It is like your 13-year-old cousin
Exactly.
when he wants to play your games and you say no.
Exactly.
It is disgusting how this Peter acts, but I think it does a really good job and helps really get into
And kind
the
of ground
feeling
him
of
as
it.
a teenager.
It's almost as if he is a teenager.
Exactly. And then obviously the first issue ends with him doing the stereotypical "I'm going to see you."
Yeah, everything that the one way to tell if you're Spider-Man aside from doing the train event. I mean the
The train.
Hercules. Sorry, Toby did it well. I meant the Hercules pole. And then we move on to issue 2, which is called Growing Pains.
Mm.
Which, I mean, I still haven't hit puberty yet, so I don't quite know what this is like. But Peter is starting to have, like, bad days as he, like, starts maybe getting a little sleepy in school. And
Mhm.
when he wakes back up, he tears his desk
Yeah,
in
he like
two.
just jerks up and just breaks the desk.
I wish I had that strength.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, he's acting like a weird kid. Everyone's still making fun of him. So Flash decides that he wants to kind of bully him even more because I mean, if he's being a
Mm-hmm.
nerd, he's gonna be a nerd.
And like I said, you get that teenage angst again. Where he's like, fuck you, I'm gonna fight you.
And though Peter doesn't try to, he's only trying to defend himself. Last I remember, he accidentally breaks Flash's wrist because he doesn't know what strength he has. And this is a very interesting thing that happens because, well, actually, we'll get a little bit more into that with the teenage angst. And so basically, Flash's best friend Kong tells the story to everyone, including Harry. And then Harry, if Harry hears, then Norman Osborn hears. So we already know that Norman's getting this insight because it's kind of that dramatic irony of we know that Norman knows that Peter is like having
Something's going on.
superpowers, and Norman makes a plan to have Harry invite Peter back over to Osborn Industries. And then the thing is, a very interesting thing that happens is the fact that Peter has to pay for the bills. Peter, who has been bullied this entire time by these kids over and over again, is the one that has to suffer.
Yeah, the Flash family ends up like suing them for the bills or whatever, and you see like the sad kind of like we don't have the money for this moment.
And listening to like Uncle Ben try talking about it, it's like this is not how we raised you, but all he did was try to defend himself. But how are you supposed to tell that you have superpowers now?
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. It's like and so you get that once again that teenage angst from Peter, and like Uncle Ben is just trying his best to raise him and be there, and Peter storms off, and Uncle Ben's just sad.
So, with that in mind, Peter then goes to Osborn Industries. In most concepts, they have Dr. Octavius and Norman Osborn working together at some point.
Yeah.
Normally, by this point, they're kind of branched paths. Not this one, though. This one, they are both working together in the lab still. And Octavius doesn't really have too big of a role as of right now.
Mm-mm.
We kind of just get a glance at him, and basically, I think it's like a neat little nod where it's if you read these comic books, you know what's happening next.
Yeah.
It's like supposed to get you excited, and at some point, Doc Ock does forcefully take a sample of Peter's blood. Excuse me. Sorry, and then they also find out that though Peter was dying, whatever happened just now made him stronger. He stopped, it's stabilized, he's healthier than ever, and Norman decides that he wants to recreate what has happened so that way he can use the powers for whatever evil plans he's got next. And I'll let you take back over.
Yep. And then at this point, that issue ends. We go to issue 3 called Wannabe, and
I
this
thought it
is
said
no
Wannabe. Like
Wannabe.
Yuri Watanabe.
No.
You've been playing too much PS5.
Yeah, we have. So Norman at this point is like trying to sell it to like the board to go to like human trials, and he wants to specifically do it on himself. But we don't really see the kind of results of this right now because it cuts back over to Peter, and there's the wrestling ring. The very old school wrestling ring, like, oh, I'm so tough, you can't take me in the wrestling ring, and all the kids are like, oh, this is dumb because it's like close to school or whatever, and they're like, you can't fight in here unless you're 21, and Peter has like one of the greatest claps at Flash Thompson's point because he's like, man, I could take him, and he's like, well, why don't you go get in the ring and then sue him when you lose? And it's such a great moment. But then, like, obviously, Peter goes home. He makes his, you know, really cheap wrestling suit. Shows up with a mask. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna do it." And he wins, takes the money, and he ends up giving the money to his aunt and uncle, but like through a secret letter, like from the school, saying there was anonymous like grant money.
And here is one of already the big differences because Peter went to the wrestling ring. He actually won, made a profit. Everything went well this time. And if you remember the old one, this is where things kind of went to shit.
Immediately.
So, with I'm sorry.
Continue. I was just gonna start saying that like at this point we kind of get some interesting gym scenes where Flash and Peter kind of argue. Peter throws a ball like right in Flash's face, and since Flash's hand's broken, he can't play basketball this season. So the coach is like, "I mean, Peter, you've been holding out on me. Why don't you join the team?" And Peter at this point's like, "I could do that." He's got that kind of cocky arrogance of a teenager and doesn't really think anything about it.
Also, I do want to point out that it'll go into this a little bit later, but it's not because he wants to play; it's because of spite.
Exactly.
Like I'm pretty sure he looks at Flash Thompson in this exact moment. He's like, you know what? I will
No,
play.
he does. He looks Flash in the eyes and says it. And obviously, like Peter is great in basketball because of his enhanced abilities, and becomes actually a little popular from that. And Mary Jane gets upset with Peter because he's not spending time with her because he has stuff.
And
that's exactly what he says.
Every single Spider-Man is gonna always have arguably such a great dilemma. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's what this is about, and it's always trying to juggle everything that they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Spider-Man trying to juggle. Now he's doing this wrestling stuff for extra cash, but he's also trying to make sure that his family can be okay. Now he's also trying to do his schoolwork while also trying to just be spiteful too. Now he's completely missing out on MJ, who's arguably like this is probably one of my favorite renditions of MJ.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like I've been reading a couple new issues of Spider-Man, and like if you've watched the other videos that I don't know have come out before this or around this time, but I don't like Spider-Man PS5's MJ. We've had this discussion. I do like her redesign in the new game that's coming out, but I don't really care for her in that one. The original's not bad, and then the 2018 version's pretty good too. Like being able to see her like rock the Iron Spire at certain points, but I really like this version of MJ because we kind of get to see them just her being a person.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's not heavily reliant on Spider-Man, but yeah, just to be fair, I've only read like the first 22 issues, so I don't know how that's gonna change.
I get you. So obviously Peter continues the wrestling thing. The wrestling ring ends up giving him the name the Amazing Spider-Man, and then they end up making him a suit. It doesn't have any webbing or the symbol or anything, and so he's like, I can modify this, and so he ends up obviously making his official suit now at this point. But at this point in time, we kind of cut back to Norman and the experiment, and he gets his way and is able to experiment on himself. And Harry is watching as it's going on, and obviously, you can't have mad science without mad results, and shit goes wrong.
Like always. And then we move on to issue 4, which is called With Great Power. I think we know what's coming next. And yeah, Anthony talked about how it was mad results. It's disgusting. Big accident, numerous fatalities. Everyone's dead. But like we get a little bit of segment of that, and then we immediately jump back to the wrestling ring.
Mm-hmm.
And then someone steals the money from the wrestling ring. We know where this is going.
Yeah, and then they blame Peter.
Yes, because Peter actually has not revealed his identity at this point because he built the wrestling suit, came in, literally did stuff so that way he could do the wrestling, make the money. And then even though he's been winning and consistently, why would he need to steal the money? They blame him because he doesn't have they don't have a name to a face.
Yep.
And so Peter just runs away, and he happens to come across someone robbing a completely different place.
Mm-hmm.
But still, in Spider-Man fashion, does not stop the robber. He was having a bad day, so like, why would he help someone
Right.
else out?
No, exactly. That teenage angst. He ends up getting home. Aunt May at this point is like, "What the fuck are these grades?" It's just yelling at him, and of course, like I said, teenage angst is in full go right now, and he just storms off. He's like, "I'm gonna go stay with a friend," and he
And
ends up going to stay with Kong.
Kenny's, yep,
Yep, Kenny. Yep.
because he it's very interesting because at the beginning of this, Kong was Flash Thompson's ride or die, and then we get to see a little bit more depth of Kong slash Kenny because when he goes there, he specifically talks about how he's part of the basketball team now. Since he's part of the basketball team, we're all working together, we're all a team. So he's more than willing to let him crash, but also he just so happens to crash at the night of a party, and
Hmm.
I mean with that teen angst, there's a little bit of something else, and every guy knows what I'm talking about. So he's being a little cool, cocky son of a bitch, and he gets with a random girl by the name
Liz
of Liz.
Allen.
And what happens is Mary Jane. Well, wait, did she put on him? I think she
Yeah,
put.
Liz Allen was like drunk and then started like trying to make out with Peter. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
like necessarily consensual, but it wasn't like, "Hey, don't do that."
It was more of a kind of compliant,
Hmm.
and of course, in Spider-Man fashion, if Peter Parker was a human, he'd be the unluckiest and luckiest man alive because MJ walks in and sees it, and he sees her, so he's like, "Oh shit, I gotta go explain this to her." He runs out there, and who does he find? His Uncle Ben.
Hmm. And at this point in time, Uncle Ben gives Peter the talk, the very specific talk that we all know very well.
Wigga That's what it says on the.
Obviously, yes, with great power comes great responsibility,
I like Wigga
and Uncle Ben explains to Peter that that was his dad's motto. And at this point in time, Peter does not take that well at all. He gets very pissed off. He's like, "Well, why the fuck is my dad here to tell me that?" You know?
Your dad's
And
dead.
gets angry and just runs away. And at this point in time, the camera, or not camera, but the comic book panels kind of go away, and we see some kind of weird gargoyle looking ass thing hiding in the rain watching Peter. And then eventually Peter comes home and there's cops outside. Oh no.
So, issue number 5, Life Lessons. Ironic as hell considering Uncle Ben's situation. And so, the first thing we get is we get Harry waking up to his mom screaming his name. And his house is on fire. And also, if this was any better, if anything could be worse, his mom is now dead with that same gargoyle-like monstrosity who a little bit different from original Spider-Man. Just straight up throws a fireball at him
Mm-hmm.
because why not? It's ultimate. We get to do that. And so we have Harry that's in a panic and a distress, and then we jump back to Peter, who is listening. Well, we jump back technically to Aunt May, who is explaining the whole situation of the attempted robbery, which is so. If you sit down and actually like listen to it, Uncle Ben was just trying to be nice. They genuinely have nothing, and I'm I don't know exactly. I can't quite recall exactly what he says.
Pretty much he's like, You'd have more money than us." And it just Uncle Ben, like he's such a heart of gold, and the guy pretty much thinks that he's laughing at him instead of trying to laugh to make the situation nicer, and he ends up pulling the trigger.
Which after that discussion, the recap, Peter overhears that the killer's in some sort of warehouse, and then that's where Peter goes. Peter goes to the warehouse, and he goes and deals and confronts the robber and realizes that it's the robber from the deli, the one that he could have definitely stopped. He ends up throwing him out the window, dangling by a rope, so he's not dead
Hmm.
for the police to finish up.
And then this at this point in time, Peter finally it clicks what Uncle Ben was trying to tell him,
The
and
Wiggle
yes, with great power comes great
No,
responsibility,
Wiggle
and we kind of get a little montage here of Peter just saving people, and there's a whole bunch of dialogue in here, but he's just like he finally realizes like I was selfish, I was wrong, and he's like he can never repay Uncle Ben for what happened, everything that he tried to do for him, and Peter was just a terrible person at times, and he's just like he starts really getting into that sad boy Peter moment,
The
and then
angst.
eventually he starts making his way home, and he's just normal Peter now, and MJ's waiting outside for him, and there's some, nice little dialogue. MJ's explaining to him that because of everything that's happened, him and Aunt May are going to stay at their house until they feel a little better, and Peter just breaks down in her arms, and that's where that issue ends.
It is a very touching scene that even though that the last we heard from MJ,
She was mad.
she was mad, but she understands and that he's going through troubling times. Whatever the stuff is can wait. He just lost his only father figure because we don't know where his dad is. Actually, did it mention what happened to his parents?
They're dead.
Well, okay. I didn't remember if there was a specific
Mhm.
accident or something like that.
It gets expanded on more later, but
Okay.
they're dead at this point.
And now we get to issue 6, which says big time superhero. So we get from the most depressing thing where Harry lost his mom, a giant gargoyle like invaded his house, and then Uncle Ben dies, to JJJ. We know who that is.
Yep.
J. Jonah
Jonah Jameson.
Jameson. He's pissed and needs his pictures of Spider-Man.
Yes.
And at this point, this is when Peter finally updates the suit with the spider webbing, and he has actual like web shooters using formulas from his father's. So it's very interesting that dynamic of actually I think this is where Andrew takes inspiration from Andrew Garfield's.
A little bit. Because yeah, in the Amazing Spider-Man movie, his dad was working for Oscorp, designed the spider, all that, and designed the web fluid. Or was that at the time like it was tensile strength, like cable, and Peter was able to modify it to become that. And kind of the same thing here is, his dad was trying to make a really strong cable system, and Peter was able to modify it to become webbing.
It's I know I'm gonna comment on this. It's very interesting being able to see that this one piece of continuity, this Ultimate Spider-Man, has made Sam Raimi movies the way they are. Has made the other movies. I don't know the director of those, but like the Andrew Garfield movies, made them that way because Andrew Garfield's like, especially if you go looking at the next movies that were supposed to come out, you get to really see that this one was kind of a foundation for so many different concepts. And anyways,
Oh yeah, like it has definitely lasting repercussions. And then at this point in time, Peter breaks yet another desk after falling asleep, and then we kind of see as Peter is just like, I'm done. And he's not doing basketball anymore. And he's like, I'm trying to do better. And Kong gets pissed off and ends up saying that your uncle croaks, so you can't play basketball. Just flat out. And at this point in time, Peter's like, that's just great. Thanks for the support.
It's very interesting how 180 that anyone can be in this
Oh yeah.
because like it's great to be able to see how real this is because Kong's like, oh yeah, you're part of the team, you can help it. As soon as he's not part of the team, fuck this guy. We've been making fun of him for years. Why did we ever stop? And after this, Harry returns to school since his house burned down because I mean, what else are you supposed to do at that point? He didn't get hurt, and this is where Peter gets his quote unquote
full blown spider sense. Like before, it's kind of like just like a small tingle, but now it's like, holy shit, what's going on?
and that is when boom boom explosions at the school. I hope you edit those in. Like, you can leave it a
I'm
black.
just gonna like muffle all the other sounds and just up that sound.
Just like explode anybody's ears that has headphones. And Harry, he knows what it is. Everyone runs outside, and then it says it's come for him. More explosions. Boom, boom.
And at this point in time, Spider-Man shows up, and we see a very large kind of gargoyle, very buff.
Very big, very daddy.
Yeah.
Exact notes.
And at this point in time, like they just start fighting. Peter like has some like very fun quippy remark, like, "Can I see your hall pass?" Like it's just very funny, like dialogue. It's very we get that quippy Spider-Man that like everyone kind of knows and loves, and eventually like Spider-Man's goal is to get this giant gargoyle who is throwing fireballs out of the building away from the people, and while they're kind of like flying away, this gargoyle is just kind of like groaning and just it's just like a purr sound that he's making.
You forgot the K.
I tried to make it, but my throat said no. And
There we go.
like Peter's like, what's going on? What the fuck? He's like trying to figure it out. But that's where this one ends.
And then the next one, secret identity.
Hmm.
We finally get to this, even though his secret identity has been this way for like 3 issues now.
Yeah, exactly.
And the fight continues from the last issue. Cops show up and they try shooting what we now call the Green Goblin.
Mhm.
Which, now that we've actually like officially talked about its name, I do want to talk about the fact that this Green Goblin is like huge.
Yes,
This,
absolutely. Like it's like at least like 4 times the size of just Spider-Man.
and then we compare it to like the original Green Goblin. That guy is a guy in a suit that technically still had the same serum, but he was like human.
Hmm.
This one is entirely a monster.
Yes, like an actual like goblin kind of gargoyle like design character. It's very interesting. Like the fact that he just has flaming balls that he can throw on command.
And also another thing is like this is if this one inspired the one from Spider Verse, like I would have loved to see some fireballs thrown. I'm just saying like
Hmm.
that Goblin was a little bit different, I think.
I
But
think he did throw fireballs actually from Spider-Verse.
did he?
I think he did.
I don't remember the
Because
fireballs.
that is the one that like technically inspired that one.
Okay, well, I might have to rewatch that movie. But I mean that's just a good movie. And Peter is fighting after him,
Hmm.
and
The cops shoot him, and then that's when the Green Goblin says Parker, fully says Parker. And at this point, Peter's like, "How do you know that name?"
how do you know?
And
How do
then the goblin ends up falling off of a bridge that looks very identical to a bridge we've seen before in Green Goblin lore,
you know?
known as the bridge that Gwen Stacy died. And then he just kind of falls into the water, and that's kind of all we see. And then the police are like, "Get the Spider-Man!" And he kind of just does a backflip and runs away.
So basically, we get to establish that Spider-Man once again is always just getting the shit under the stick. He can
Hmm.
save the world, but someone's like, "You, we don't know who you are, so you're obviously a bad guy."
Yeah. And then we kind of cut back to the school where Peter is found hiding under, I think it was a chalkboard.
Hmm.
And Harry's like freaking out, saying it was like his dad, and he's like, "I saw what happened," and he's just kind of like freaking out, and he ends up getting taken away by the police, and May shows up, and we end up at the very end of the issue seeing some bubbles at the bridge, kind of just floating up, insinuating that the Green Goblin may not be dead.
So another thing that's interesting about this that was down in our notes, we get to see the dilemma that Peter has in his head, because Peter knows as Spider-Man that he heard his name being called, but how is he supposed to reassure his friend Harry that like it wasn't chasing after him, it was
After
chasing after
Spider.
him?
Mm-hmm.
Get it, two hymns. But then also, I think that's why the secret identity really is working here. That's why it's titled this, because now, how would he have known, and how would he be able to explain it to his buddy?
No,
So
exactly.
now he's left with a dilemma of trying to help his friend or leave him mentally scarred but protect his identity. And in the end, he doesn't. He chooses not to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I think that this is a pretty good place to round up for this first arc.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, overall, this was just a really nice introduction to get in the swing of things.
And into the Ultimate Spider-Man universe alone.
Yes. Like, we saw the similarities, such as the wrestling, the first one not really
Mhm.
happening the
Uncle
way it
Ben's
was
death,
supposed
of
to go.
course.
It's kind of interesting to me that not only it was two robberies that really kind of set everything into motion. It was the one at the wrestling ring, which I'm pretty sure might have been one of the wrestlers that was pawning it off onto Spider-Man.
More than likely.
So that is just a bad case of Parker luck,
Hmm.
because he didn't do anything wrong, let alone the fact that he it didn't even affect him all that much. It's just he lost his source of income at that point. And then, due to the fact that he was upset about a completely different situation, a different
Yep.
robbery,
He chose not to stop this other robbery.
so it was almost like it was, the saying, that's the way the cookie crumbles.
It was literally just dominoes. Da 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 da.
It felt almost as though someone threw the cookie on the ground and stomped on it. And we got to see that along with the fact that we new perspective of Harry Osborn, because Harry was always good friends. And does he still have his like cornrows hair or whatever it's called?
No, I don't. I
Oh,
wouldn't say
thank
they're
God.
necessarily cornrows this time around. Um, Yeah, I'm gonna pull up a picture you can see. Sorry.
So, but like we definitely get to see a different
Yeah.
dynamic of Harry.
I would not say it's corners.
Oh, that's a really nice hairstyle.
Yeah.
I'll take that. But we get to see a different version of Harry where they're not necessarily friends. So really, the only friend at this point for Peter is MJ.
Yep.
And even then, he still doesn't have enough time to hang out with her or do
And
anything
he
with
also
her.
is keeping like arm's length with everything going on. And so
It's
it's a very interesting dynamic. He doesn't really have anyone in his corner right now.
he should have his Uncle Ben and Aunt May, but Uncle Ben went bye bye, and then Aunt May is
Is angry.
not too happy with him. And with the next couple issues that we'll read and review, we'll get to see Aunt May kind of fall deeper and deeper into just wallowing in her own grief. And it's a
Mm-hmm.
very interesting concept because when we look at Aunt May from the original, I kind of like the way they present her in this one, though we haven't necessarily read it like we said, but she is a lot more not indestructible. Aunt May in the original, the older comics, she is always there to be the bigger person, to take the step in the right direction, or at least do her best to help everyone that can.
Oh yeah.
But this one here, it's going to show her that she's going to be a lot more human, and it's going to be a lot more angst from Peter, and when
Mm-hmm.
it comes down to it.
Well, we would like to thank you for joining us in the Ultimate Spider-Man in review.
Yeah,
I'm Anthony,
I'm Chris.
and we are Misguided Membership.
All right,
Bye bye.
bye bye.